Battleship is a guessing game for 2 players. It is known worldwide as a pencil and paper game which dates from World War I. It was published by various companies as a pad and pencil game in the 1930s, and was released as a plastic board game by Milton Bradley in 1967. History: the game of Battleship is thought to have its origins in the French game L'Autre take place during World War I, although parallels have also been drawn to E.I. Horseman's 1890 game Battleship, and the game is said to have been played by Russian officers before World War I. The first commercial version of the game was Salvo, published in 1931 in the United States by the Starex Company. Other versions of the game were printed in the 1930s and 1940s, including the Strathmore Company's Combat, the Battleship game, Milton Bradley's Broadsides, a game of naval strategy, and Morris L. Friedman's Warfare Naval Combat. Strategy Games Company produced a version called Wings which pictured planes flying over the Los Angeles Coliseum. All of these early editions of the game consisted of pre-printed pads of paper. In 1967 Milton Bradley introduced a version of the game that used plastic boards and pegs. This method of involved play using pegboards and miniaturized plastic ships was thought of by Ed Hutchins. In 1977, Milton Bradley also released a computerized electronic battleship, followed in 1989 by electronic talking battleship. In 2010, an updated version of Battleship was released, using hexagonal tiles. In the updated version, each player's board contains several islands on which captured man figurines can be placed. Ships may be placed only around the islands, and only in the player's half of the board. Battleship was one of the earliest games to be produced as a computer game, with a version being released for the Z80 Compicolor in 1979, and Atari's Battlezone following in the early 1980s. Many computer editions of the game have been produced since. In clubhouse games for the Nintendo DS, Battleship is known as Grid Attack. It is played on an 8 grid, and includes slight variations, such as 4-player gameplay, various ship sizes and shapes, as well as the option to make the ships touch each other. Iterations of Battleship appear as applications on numerous social networking services. Battleship was also part of Hasbro Family Game Night for the PlayStation 2 and Wii, as well as the Xbox 360. These alter the rules, including the size of the grid, size of ships and special shot missiles for each ship. A minigame version of the game was used in the 3rd season of the Hub's Family Game Night, which uses a 5 grid, and the first team to sink 3 ships wins the game. The 2012 film Battleship is an American science fiction action movie inspired by the board game. Description: the game is played on 4 grids, 2 for each player. The grids are typically square usually 10A, 10 euro, and the individual squares in the grid are identified by letter and number. On one grid the player arranges ships and records the shots by the opponent. On the other grid the player records his/her own shots. Before play begins, each player secretly arranges their ships on their primary grid. Each ship occupies a number of consecutive squares on the grid, arranged either horizontally or vertically. The number of squares for each ship is determined by the type of the ship. The ships cannot overlap. The types and numbers of ships allowed are the same for each player. These may vary depending on the rules. There are 2 typical complements of ships, as given in the Milton Bradley version of the rules. After the ships have been positioned, the game proceeds in a series of rounds. In each round, each player takes a turn to announce a target square in the opponent's grid which is to be shot at. The opponent announces whether or not the square is occupied by a ship, and if it is a hit they mark this on their own primary grid. The attacking player notes the hit or miss on their own tracking grid, in order to build up a picture of the opponent's fleet. When all of the squares of a ship have been hit, the ship is sunk, and the ship's owner announces this. If all of a player's ships have been sunk, the game is over and their opponent wins. Variations: in the 1931 Salvo edition of the game, players target a specified number of squares at one time, and all of the squares are attacked simultaneously. A player may initially target 6 squares per turn, and this is decreased as ships are lost. In other variants of this mechanic, The number of shots a player is allowed to fire each turn may either be fixed at 5 for the whole game, be equal to the number of unsunk ships belonging to the player, or be equal to the size of the player's largest undamaged ship. The receiving player may either call the result of each shot in turn, or simply announce, say, 2 hits and 3 misses, leaving their opponent to work out the consequences of the salvo. In the modern Milton Bradley rules for Battleship, salvo is listed as a variation for more experienced players, with the number of shots being equal to the number of ships that the firing player has remaining. One variant allows players to decline to announce that a ship has been sunk, requiring their opponent to take further shots in order to confirm that an area is clear. Another house rule allows a player to move one of their ships to a new, uncalled location every 4th or 5th move. A slightly different version of the game is played in India. Instead of announcing whether a shot is a hit or miss immediately, the players simply say how many of their opponent's 3 shots were hits, and if so on what kind of vessel. This allows for more strategy and gameplay and loosens the game's dependency on luck. A slightly different recording system is used in this variation as there is a new importance on what turn a player hits something on. The ships themselves are also slightly different. The Indian version uses 2 submarines, 2 destroyers, 1 battleship, as 1 aircraft carrier. Ship attack is a development of the game that stresses analytical thought over blind guessing. The players use intelligence collecting tools in order to pinpoint the location of each and every vessels in the enemy fleet. A reconnaissance airplane reports sequences of ship parts in a row or column. A satellite image can be taken to count ship parts on a 3x3 square, and a paratrooper can determine if one tile is populated by a ship part or sea. This variation can be played with the same board drawing on the pen and pencil version. Ship attack rules are a platform to Bimara-style puzzles, in which one is presented with a minimal intelligence report required to decipher an entire board. The Japanese variation of the game differs in several key aspects. It uses a 5x5 grid, on which each ship takes up 1 space. Each player has 3 ships, distinguished only by the number of hits they can sustain before sinking. Ships may move in orthogonal directions in lieu of firing, but the type of ship, distance, and direction of the move must be announced to one's opponent. Ships may only fire on neighboring squares, including diagonals, but a near miss must be declared as such. Regional variations include rules for multiple shots, limited ammunition, no consecutive moves, and friendly fire, among others. With the increasing popularity of the international version of the game, the Japanese version has apparently lapsed into comparative obscurity even in its native country. The customary Russian version known as Thu 3/4 N Euro NTH TH 3/4 TH to the first TH TH 3/4 TH to the first is comparatively simple and is mostly pen and paper. It is almost always played on a 10x10 grid. Depending on the rules, a player may or may not take another shot on the same turn if an enemy ship is hit. Ships cannot occupy squares next to each other, horizontally, vertically or diagonally. Also, the set of ships is noticeably different. The alternate designations are based on data distinctions of ship classes, namely the number of gun decks for age of sail and number of funnels for earlier steam-powered ships. Note the matching size and number of decks funnels. See also, Battleship, Mugwump, a 1973 video game, Battle Fleet, Electronic Battleship, Advanced Mission, Navy Blue Series, Battleship, References. This article incorporates information from the revision as of September 18, 2013 of the equivalent article on the Japanese Wikipedia. This article incorporates information from the revision as of March 29, 2013 of the equivalent article on the Russian Wikipedia. External links: Battleship Official Hasbro Rules, a Euro rulebook insert for Battleship, browser-based game with a random opponent or friend, Battleship at Board Game Geek.